sample file up for the section 1.5 homework. And you're given some version of a function that is a revenue function and R of P. So when I input P, I get an output of R. So my input P here, output R. We're going to use cell referencing. The problem said to enter a value of 0 in A2, which was done here. And here, if I click, I can see the formula for the revenue function entered correctly. Okay. It's then copied down all the way down to 900. That gives us a good view of how the function behaves. Now, I noticed here that for some reason this function, while it looks pretty good, the axes are not appropriate. So you see here, if my price goes from 0 to 900, this axis here is going from 0 to 40. So something's not quite right. So I'm going to graph this again. I'm going to highlight my table. I've got to highlight my inputs and my outputs. My inputs will show up on the horizontal. My outputs will show up here. If you don't highlight this input column, it just uses like the row number, right? So this is going between 0 and 36, and it's referencing this row number. We've got to include the actual price, which is the input. So now if I say insert and smooth line graph, you can see here it looks very similar, but it's a little bit different. We can see here that the point 0, 0, if I input 0, I output 0. I can see that right here. That's a horizontal intercept. Up on this graph here, it looks like it goes through at some other number, right? So this graph is not correct here. So again, make sure that you're highlighting what you're graphing, your input and your output values, not just one column. Okay, so that's one. So this question here says one of the horizontal intercepts is at 0, 0. Now I can see that right on my graph here. And then it says, but there is a second horizontal intercept to the right of that. So here it is over here. I can see it's somewhere between 800 and 1,000. So, and it wants us to find the horizontal intercept at that point. So anytime I have a horizontal intercept, my Y value or my output value is 0. So that is a clue as to when to use solver. If you are given the output of a function, you use solver to solve for the input. How am I going to take a look at that? I'm going to go, can see the X value or the input value is somewhere between 800 and 1,000. So I'm going to come down here, right? And I'm going to track my function. Okay, if I input 850, I get a revenue of 23,000. I input 850. So here, look at between $875 and $900, my revenue goes between $37.18 and $7,200. So somewhere between this value, my revenue goes from positive to negative, meaning it crosses here at 0. So when I use solver, I want to find the value that's closest to 0. Okay, so 3718 is closer to 0 than 7200. So I'm going to use solver. I'm going to put my cursor right on that value that's closest to 0. And I'm going to say data. And I'm going to say, pull this over, solver. And I get this solver menu over here. So my objective is, I always want to clear that out. My objective is to take this cell here, B37, and I want to set it equal to a value of 0. I want the output equals 0. That's where the horizontal, it goes through the horizontal axis. And then I want to change this value, A37. I'm solving for what price is going to give me a revenue equal to 0. I always want to unclick this box here. I want to click solve. Okay, so now this gives me a value close to 0. If I round this, right, I'm not sure what you did down here to get this answer, but I want to actually go find in my input-output table where it's closest to 0, which would be here. Okay. And then if I round that, that rounds to 0. The definition of a horizontal intercept is where the y value is 0. So in this case, this answer here should be 0, okay? We're always going to use solver right in here. And then let's take a look down here. Okay, so then it says use Excel to find the revenue at 4411. Okay, not sure what you did here. What we would do in this case is we would come down the input, and we don't have an input value of 4481. So I would just write at the closest value to 441.84, which would be 450. I would type in 441.84, and that would then give me, if I highlight in green, I want that in green, that will give me the maximum point.